And we are live here with Nina. Welcome to our first podcast episode today. We're both really excited to talk about one of our passions, which is books and reading, and just give everybody a bit of advice, inspiration, motivation if you are somebody who loves to read or really wants to start exploring that journey. So if you're new here, I'm sure most of you are. I am Valena and I am a personal coach, personal development coach, yoga teacher, mom of two, artist. I love creativity and I love meeting like-minded people. And Nina here is one of those people I met about 6 years ago now. We did a training together, which was a pregnancy training, and we have remained in contact ever since. She has been a huge inspiration in my own reading journey, yoga, coaching. We've done coaching sessions together, and as a whole, we have a lot of topics and things like that we like to discuss. And here we are today. So, Nina, could you introduce yourself a little more for everyone?
Yes, thank you so much. Well, firstly, thank you for having me on here. And yes, I am Nina. I am a yoga instructor. I am a mum of two. I am a reader. I am a writer. They say that, so I'm trying to get my book published at the moment, and they say that actually, even if you're not published, even as long as you've written your book, you're an author. So I'd like to say I'm an author, even though I'm not a published one yet. And yeah, I mean, like you said, we met around about 6 years ago doing pre and postnatal yoga training, but we were also trained technically together when we did our yoga training, but we were in opposite classes. So which was really interesting. And then we connected, and then we found out we literally lived like a town away from each other, like literally like 20 minutes.
In the same town.
Yeah, like it's such a small world. And we never even knew. And you know, we were out in the middle of London doing this training, and actually we lived 20 minutes down the road from each other. But yeah, I loved how you introduced yourself, by the way, that you're an artist and like just so much creativity, and I love that. So absolutely adore you for that. Absolute true inspiration. Like I always said to you before, that I always find you so inspiring. And so yeah, so thank you so much for having me on here. So I hope I've answered your first question properly. I've actually just waffled.
Oh, well, thank you, and likewise. So should we start with kind of just giving some ideas for everybody to perhaps explore some typical questions for a person who is looking to set a goal, whether that's reading or anything else. For example, personally, I always had these limiting beliefs about myself that I was a slow reader, not a very good reader. Growing up, I love books. I've always had books, but I always felt that it took me a really long time to finish a book, or I wouldn't feel very focused, easily distracted. And I'm sure these are quite valid reasons for people to begin or to know where to begin, what kind of book to pick, whether that's fiction, non-fiction, what kind of authors. I mean, there's so much out there. Like if you walk into a bookshop, you're just kind of overwhelmed. So what are the kind of suggestions you would give as somebody who, in my opinion, is quite an advanced book reader?
To be honest, something I definitely highly recommend is to just do what works for you. I mean, for example, like I am 100% a fiction reader, love reading fiction. I do have non-fiction books, as you know. I've received something from you recently, and I will read it, and I will get around to reading it. But you've got your list of what you want to read, and I admit I'm like, it's on this pile, but it's not my to be read pile. But I will read it. So I have started it as well, by the way, just so you know. So yeah, so I think everyone, we're all individuals, and it's just that you just need to do what works for you. So I'm a big mood reader. And I'll switch from romance to historical fiction to crime. And if I'm not feeling it, I'm like, so I got to put that down, and I've got to go on to something else. And it kind of just depends where the mood takes me. So some people prefer audio, and there's nothing wrong with audio. I hear people say that, oh, well, audio isn't reading a real book. And it's like, well, no, hold on a minute. Like, you're still using your creativity, your imagination. You visually see what's happening when you listen. So actually it is still reading, so whoever tells you different, like, it is so not true. It is definitely reading. So yeah, definitely highly recommend, like, do what works for you. Even if, for example, it's a recommendation from someone it's a specific author, then go read by that author. Or if it's a genre, then read by that genre. But never feel overwhelmed or pushed into doing something you don't want to do. And it's okay to DNF, did not finish. It's okay to not finish a book. 100% it is okay. And to be honest with you, you can actually get a lot out of not finishing a book. So for example, if you didn't finish it, but you can still have a discussion about it. So if you didn't finish it, it's honestly, I would never have thought it's an issue. But never feel pressured to having to read something, and to be like, I need to like this because everyone else does. I mean, we're all individual for that reason. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend.
I'm actually in that place at the moment, and I shared this with you yesterday that I am trying to push through this book that I'm reading at the moment. I'm 200 pages in, which feels like a big investment. And I have another 100 left. And I'm usually, whenever I read, like, I don't like to skim through, I like to properly take in every word. And I'm finding myself kind of jumping through the sentences, which to me seems like it's not really worth it, worth my time. And I'm finding it hard to say, okay, I'm gonna leave this book behind and
Yeah.
focus on something that I enjoy more. And another thing which is not really allowing me to stop reading is that I have set myself a goal for
Right.
this year of how many books I'd like to read. And this is something I wanted to ask you again about, because I'm always in awe when I hear somebody has read like even 25, 50, 100 books a year.
Yeah.
To me, who is quite, new to the reading habit, I find that to be huge. And it's not all about the number, but I think when you consider how much knowledge you can gain from a good book,
Yeah.
how much you can transport yourself through a story of somebody's imagination. I just think it's, really impressive personally. And yeah, what would you say about goal setting and things getting in the way sometimes?
So, firstly, like you said, goal setting and things get in the way. Don't ever put pressure on yourself. So, it's that we set ourselves things like goals and achievements, but actually, it's okay not to achieve it, and it's okay to not reach that goal. It's that whole thing of, it's that mountain to climb. So you're walking up that hill and you're trying to get to the top. If you don't make it, it's okay. Like, it's not easy. Like you said, things get in the way. Always start small. To be honest with you, always start small. And then if you're that person to be like, I need to feel that that rush of completing something. Start small, knowing you'll complete it, and then be like, okay, if I go bigger, I'll go bigger. But you've completed that goal, and then you'll feel more satisfaction out of that rather than feeling defeated because you didn't reach it. You know, like in January, people make these New Year's resolutions, and actually, they can be more damaging than they are good for us, because it's stated that after the first 4 weeks, I think 50 or 60% stop, like, lose interest, or don't make it. And actually, then, like I said, it can be more damaging. So honestly, if you're going to set a goal for reading, 100% start small. There is a big thing within the book community where and it's not bragging rights. It's where people are like, I've read this many books, or I've done this much, and then other people are like, well, how can you do that? Do you remember those books? Do you remember what happened in them? And it's like, well, no, hold on a minute. Like, that's that person's personal goal and that personal achievement, but it's not for someone else to backlash on them, which is unfortunately what people have been getting in the book community. So with their reading, when they put up their reading goals, but always make it personal to you. So it doesn't need to be big, and actually you choose what you want to read. So for example, if you read a novella, which is classed as a book to be read in one sitting, um that's not, if that's 10 books, that could take you maybe 10 days. If you're a quick reader, you read it in one sitting, but it doesn't mean it's a full book of a minimum of like 300 pages, which can take at least a couple of days, depending on how many hours you have in that day. So actually all of those goals are all become personal to you, but my biggest advice is start small and don't put pressure on yourself. Again, whether it's you don't finish the book, whether it's that you don't reach that goal within however time scale you make it enjoyable. I always think reading is a really enjoyable thing. As you said, we can learn so much from reading. Fiction, I find, is a massive, massive escapism. I definitely use it as an escapism, from everyday life, from reality, from having two young children, just to step away from what we do. But definitely do it something that you enjoy. Yeah, and don't put pressure on yourself. Yeah.
No, definitely, I agree with you because it's interesting how, you're really into fiction and I'm really into non-fiction. And for me as well, that's an escapism, even though it's completely different. So it just kind of goes to prove that for everybody individually, it's important to find what works for you and also to keep exploring because at the moment I am trying to explore more kind of novels and something different than what I'm used to kind of get out of my comfort zone. And that was another thing which hearing you speak reminded me of how sometimes when for whatever goal you set for yourself or whichever challenge you're faced with in life and you have to overcome in some way, sometimes we set the bar too high and come way out of our comfort zone. But if, like you said, you start small and you take a small step in the direction that you want to go, then you're more likely to succeed and build that trust within yourself to then continue and do more. Because that's what usually happens. Like you said, with the goal setting, people set too high of a goal to achieve, and then you're just disappointed and frustrated and yeah, so
And like, so
um,
like, it then becomes an unrealistic expectation.
mm,
And that's what can end up doing the opposite to what you want, because you've set something unrealistic. So don't, if you're just starting getting into reading, don't set yourself a goal of 200 books in a year, which is what, 365 days. And think that you're going to do it, because actually there may be books that you don't like or you don't enjoy. So you're better off maybe starting 12 books. That's one book a month. So you've given yourself 4 weeks per book, and that's more realistic. If you make 13 books in that year, so you go over your 12, well, that's fantastic. If you don't, and you only make it to say 10 books or 7 books, you still did it. You still, from someone who doesn't usually read, or maybe reads 2 books a year because you only read them when you go abroad on holiday, or, or when you're literally have nothing else to do. Actually, that's a really good achievement. Even if you didn't reach your original goal, that's still a really good achievement. So people should be proud of themselves for wherever they are within their achievements, and whatever they want to set for themselves. So
And what are some of the ways you would suggest that somebody who is quite new to reading or making reading more of a habit would start with? So, for example, different times in the day would be better, or what could be the start of a routine that is effective?
start a routine. So something I really recommend is look at yourself from when you are using your phone or a digital device as a distraction, and then think, is that worthwhile? So, for example, if you're typing an email, of course, that's something that maybe you should be doing. That's something that's important. If you're scrolling through social media and it to isn't doing anything towards something apart from numbing your brain, then maybe it's better to pick up a book. I mean, totally, sometimes I'm not in the mood to read, and I'll go through, I'll scroll through social media, or I'll watch YouTube shorts a lot. But at the same time, I'm a bit like, or my biggest thing is I'll pick up a book and read. We all need to fit in balance. So I'm not saying don't do this completely, but I'm saying find your balance. If you want to start reading, pick up a book and start reading, and put social media or that digital distraction down. Pick up a book that you think you might enjoy, and sit down and just start reading it. Some people, the time of the day, I'd recommend in the evening. It's a really good way to relax the mind. It's a really good way to start to get yourself ready, for bed. Literally just kind of that wind down. Um, and yeah, so I'd say that's actually a really, really healthy thing, personally, and just because the way that we're designed, we're not designed to consistently be on digital devices and look at screens. Your eyes start to hurt, you end up getting a headache. Um, of course, you do have digital reading devices. So again, totally fine. You can change the settings on those to put them in dark mode to help dim the lights, ready for your eyes, or pick up a physical book, and to sit and to read. Something I also recommend is to reading out loud. So reading out loud isn't easy. It's not, when you read out loud and you're stuttering on your words, or you're pausing and breaking before the next word, is because reading out loud is actually a skill, and it takes practice. However, if you feel, oh, you can't concentrate, or it's too quiet, or you're thinking or getting distracted to try to do something else, just sit and to read out loud. Even if it's not very good, it doesn't matter, because it allows the brain to focus on what it's doing. Same as we do within yoga, such as we focus on the breath, whether it's through meditation or whether it's, shavasana, so our restorative pose, focus on the breath. Within reading, focus on the words. And if you're getting distracted, read out loud. And you're reading to yourself, even if you're whispering it, because you don't want anyone else to hear if there's more than one person in the room. But honestly, it's genuinely really good for you. Really helps for you to focus on the words, and also learn it actually helps you learn that skill to read out loud, which people wouldn't realize.
I actually tried that out. It was so funny. I got out of breath, which is
Yeah.
just ridiculous because I mean, you're reading a book, you're not exercising or anything, but like you say, it's a skill that you need to develop because your brain, when you're reading, you're going at a a faster pace than you would perhaps when you're talking.
Yeah.
And it was it was really interesting. Um, So yeah, definitely something to practice, and it did help me to focus my attention because when, for the past 4 years, I don't think I had one night of sleep through the night.
Yeah.
So I was just so tired and I was, trying to read, not working. And then recently, as I started to sleep a bit more, I am seeing that my attention is better. But definitely reading out loud is something to try if you haven't already. Um, and something else you mentioned, or something I rather wanted to ask was if you feel like you are alone. So if this is new to you, if you need advice or recommendations, what is kind of the best place to find that support?
So that's a really good question, because all again with reading, everything's a personal opinion, right? So you all have a personal view. Um, so I do recommend, so you do get book recommendations, so such as, God, I don't know if I can, am I allowed to name names? Am I allowed to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think so.
Quite like the Richard and Judy, they do they like you got the Richard and Judy books, like what they recommend, and it's like they're kind of spotlight, and you've got the Reese Witherspoon um
I
book club.
actually joined that one recently. I never
She's
knew.
got some.
Yeah.
So there's some really, really, and there's a couple of books of from her list that I've read, and I was like, oh yeah, that was a really good choice. So definitely there's that. Something I did with friends a couple of years ago was there's a list of 100 books to read before you die, and me and two friends actually went through the list. We didn't finish it. I think we got to like book 30 or something. Um, and then kids get in the way, but we were actually going through that, and that was really interesting. And um again, differences of opinion. I would have been quite happy not to read some of those books. I didn't think, if I had to write one of those lists, those wouldn't have been on it, personally. But yeah, so I do recommend things like you can look up book recommendations, but also Bookstagram, which is Instagram, but mainly focusing on books.
For books.
It's literally called Bookstagram. Yeah, it's literally called Bookstagram. So, and you can, and it's a massive community. It's absolutely huge. But you get so many people recommending books on there, and like people give book reviews, same as myself. You give book reviews. And then if you like the review, you can be like, oh yeah, like I'd quite like to read that. And that's how I've managed to choose some books, and seen books, and I was like, oh yeah. Or you forget about a book and think, oh, that sounds really good, that looks really good, and then a couple of weeks later it comes up that someone else has read it, they've really enjoyed it, and you're like, oh, something, yeah, I should really read that, I should really take a look at that. So yeah, I recommend, so Bookstagram, Reese Witherspoon's recommendations, you've got Rich and Judy recommendations, and maybe 100 books to read before you die. However, maybe take a look at the list and pick the book that you fancy rather than trying to go through the list,
Mhm.
because some of those I wouldn't I wouldn't have recommended personally. And I don't know who comes up with that list either. I don't know who comes up with that list.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually found the courage because I have wanted to join a book club for a really long time. But like I said, with my previous limiting beliefs, I felt quite afraid to do that. But I am pushing myself out of my comfort zone. And it's so funny how everything happened. The signs and law of attraction that I believe in that kind of magnetic energy of where you place your focus, your energy, you attract back to you. And as soon as I put it into my awareness, like, okay, now is the time that I will find a book club. And I literally went into the shop and the bookstore, and I asked, "Do you know of any book clubs?" And the lady was like, "Oh yes, I put one together," and we just linked up, and they invited me, and I went the other day. And the funny thing was that the book they had read, um, they had nothing to say about. And they was talking about this book that they hated for about 45 minutes. And it was just so funny to me because when you know what you don't like, what you don't enjoy, you can much easily kind of focus on what you want, if that makes sense. So you kind of cut out you know, the thing. So it was a great first meeting for me because I was like, okay, I am never reading those kinds of books because that's just a waste of time. And yeah, it was a really, really nice experience, really lovely and supportive. And I had all of these questions about books, and it turned out a couple of the ladies were actually English teachers. And I
Oh,
was
wow.
asking about Jane Austen recommendations, like where to start. And, it was really, really fun. And I would definitely say to anybody who's thinking to join a book club, um, to just try out in your local area or online. I have found other book clubs online, and yeah, it's actually a really nice community.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And like you said, yeah, I totally didn't even mention book clubs, but 100% book clubs, definitely. I know that I've joined a few book clubs at different times. The one I'm on at the moment is a virtual book club, and it's really lovely because how we do it is we all put in a book recommendation. So there's between 5 and 7 of us, but some people drop out depending if they're busy that month, or like take a period of a break. But of course, they just jump back in. It's really relaxed, and so we all pick a book. And somehow last month, not last month, the last like 5 months, all the books we picked were just nothing was happy. Not like nothing was happy. We had, so I picked Misery by Stephen King. Um, and like that's one of those other books was A Thousand Boy Kisses. Absolutely beautiful, absolutely broke me. It literally had us all ugly cry. Like a book that had us all ugly cry. And there was me thinking with the title, that it was gonna be really really uplifting. And it's a really lovely book. Like I really do 100% recommend it, but be prepared with tissues and to ugly cry. Um and then the most recent book we had was The Paper Palace. And it was really funny because so I did the book via audio. One of the other girls I think did audio, and then two of the girls did but like Kindle and a physical book. And I still had an hour left. One of the other girls still had 2 hours left. But the two girls that had finished it, we came onto their call, and we were just like, so what do you think? Like, and they had questions. And I was like, so what are your questions? They were like, well, we just wanted your opinion of the ending. And of course I hadn't finished the ending. So and it was a really great discussion, even though we didn't talk about the end because they want us to finish the end. We talked about characters, plot, narrative, style of writing. And then of course, we ended. Then the next day I finally finished the book, and I messaged, and the other girl finished the book, and then we were all talking about the end. And so it was just a great discussion, just really really good discussion. And and actually, I didn't answer your main question, which is like, if you feel lonely, how do you pick your books? And of course I said how to pick your books, but 100% like what you said, if you feel lonely, like join a book group. You're right, that is the answer. Join a book group. So if you do feel lonely, or if you read a book, or you don't even have to join a book group, you can do a buddy read. So if you have a book that you're going to read, you can actually put it out there. So Bookstagram, And like some people say currently reading or reading next. And if they're going to read next and you think, oh, I like the sound of that book, you can then be like, oh, something, I'd really like to read that book. Did you fancy doing a buddy read? And you can then both read that book together. There are actual PR companies which promote books, and they do a read along. So, and if you don't get the book from the PR company, they can give you prompt cards. And you can request those, and they don't cost anything. But then you get your own book, and then you've got, so for example, it's the book, you read it over the space of 5 days, and the chapters are split from, say, chapter 1 to 7 you read on day 1, chapters 8 to 11 you read on day 2, and then there's questions in between. And then you can just join the chat groups, which are again on social media, so to answer the questions and to see how people thought about the book. And everyone's at different stages, so you try not to put spoilers in the chat, or if someone's at the same level as you, you just end up IMing them, so like just privately, and be like, oh my god, have you read this bit, or like, what page are you at, which is what I've done before. If I've read a book and I was like, oh my god, like this happened, I was like, has anyone read up to this chapter? And if someone says they have, I'll be like, look, I'll message you now. And then we've had a separate conversation about the book. And yeah, it's genuinely, it is a really open and social community. But like you said, 100% book groups, social media, buddy reads. And to be honest with you, it sounds really silly. Even I know that people don't meet up like we used to, and everything is done online and virtually, but it is actually a really good way to meet someone. And as you said, people who are in common with you, you kind of want to expose yourself to like-minded people and have that thing in common. And you can, it just opens up so much. It just opens up so much. So yeah.
No, you're so right. And if you're not somebody who reads, you might be somebody who watches a lot of TV. So it's kind of like switching the two. I mean, that's definitely something I'm doing at the moment, because usually, like, we have a couple of TV shows that we go through on different nights, and then I'm thinking, okay, if I want to make the time to read more, I have to let go of something in order to make the time to read. It really is as simple as that. Like you said, if you want to do something, you just start doing it. And it is hard at first because it's something new to you. And you might start getting these different emotions, which, frustrate you, or like, oh, this is taking too long, or this is, just something new. But the more you stick to it, the more you discipline yourself, like something I've been trying to do. I, surround myself with books, and I really work on a nighttime routine to prepare myself for that experience. Because when you make it like a ritual of
Yeah.
sort, like it's something that you look forward to in your day. Like I started to, during the afternoons, I'm like, oh my God, I really can't wait for the kids to go to bed so I can go through my routine, get in bed, and, just read my book. And that makes it really fun. Um, so definitely there's a lot you can do on your own as well. And then when you add the community element, it just kind of combines everything and makes it more solid, and more of a success kind of moving forward.
Yeah.
Um, but something else I wanted to ask you, you recommended some books, which I was going to ask you already. But if you could take one book with you, or if
Oh.
one is too difficult, two or maybe three. Okay, let's do it three, because that's like a yogic, number. If you could take three books with you on a desert island, what books would those be?
Okay, so so am I all, and I've I've heard this question before, and I countered it with can I take a book series? And then so can it be 3 series? And you've got
Okay.
like 20 books, right? Um, because I was like, oh god, it's so hard to choose. Okay, I would something is really hard because I'm thinking of my authors. I'm thinking of authors I really like. So there's a book that I've not long recently read, which was One Hot Summer, um, and
That'll be
Anita.
a nice book to read on the beach.
It's crime. Yeah, so
Oh.
it's even with the title, right? So and slightly off topic, there's a thing that goes around is tell us what this book is about. So write the blurb of this book by looking at the title and the front cover. Some of the stuff you get is hilarious, by the way. It's really funny because exactly what you said. Like I gave you the title and then you've thought of what it could be, what the genre is, and what it's about. And it's like, oh no, like it's crime fiction, right? So with
Mm.
detectives. But yeah, One Hot Summer, by I want Anita Waller. I want to say Waller. God, I'm worried I've got the names wrong now. Like I'm right on the spot. Anita Waller. I thought that was a great book. Oh god, and I've got so many series in my head. I've got there's a series I really like, and I can't take that. I can't take that. Um, because it's like a book of 5, right? Um, Okay, so right. So I would take, and this is part of a series, but I will take book 1 because it's really funny and it's just brilliant. The Janet Ivanovich series, which is One for the Money. Main character Stephanie Plum. It's just so funny. It's again, it's like comedy. Oh, and I've just remembered my third book. I've just thought of my third book. So that's like action comedy. But it's just really funny. And my next one is, which I absolutely love, is A is for Auntie by Jessie Soto. I've actually got her second book next to me. By Jessie Sutanto. Sutanto, so the surname. And it is A is for Aunties. Wait, let me just check that. Yeah,
We can
dial A for Aunties.
in the description box all of the suggestions if
Yeah,
anybody's interested
yeah,
to
okay.
give
Yeah,
them a
that'd be
go.
great. Right. But dial A for Aunties, and honestly, it is so funny. And I've recommended it to so many people, that book, and it's literally like if you want a laugh out loud funny book to take your mind off of anything. So if I was stranded on a desert island, my 3 books would be Dial A for Auntie, One for the Money, and One Hot Summer. So yeah, comedy, bit of romance, and crime, which are my 3 genres.
I mean, I recently, with this book I told you about, that I'm thinking to stop reading. It's actually a comedy, like a
Yeah.
novel, and I wondered, like reading the title, I was intrigued how I could find a book funny, because it's I think typical when you watch like comedy show or something, the actors kind of bring about that emotion and character and everything. But when you're reading, it's all in your imagination, and you have to kind of bring that out of the characters that you imagine. And I did have this aha moment like when I was reading it, and there were some funny points, and I was thinking, wow, like this feels really great. It's something new, something different. Like it's coming from my own imagination. It's not somebody else standing in front of me and acting it out. Um, so yeah, definitely if you're somebody who hasn't yet read a book, and if you think all books are just boring, descriptive, do have a go at reading something funny.
Yeah.
because it will evoke something within you for sure.
Well, and also, so like you said, I mean, there's different types of books. You've got graphic novels, there's still books. You've got, like I said, novellas. I mean, you've got so many genres and so many subgenres. Whether it's romantic comedy, whether it's fantasy, whether it's sci-fi, whether it's romance, erotic fiction, like anything, like you've even got the subgenres, so to that as well. But it's exactly like for example, like with me and you, we're both yoga instructors, but we both teach differently, even though we teach the same style. So actually, with our students, I always say to them, like, you need to connect with the style as well as the instructor. So if you like
Mhm.
my style, but you don't like my instructing, it's okay. Don't give up yoga. Try someone else. Try, someone else that's local down the road. And actually, you may connect with them more. I'm definitely more of a physical instructor than I am a spiritual instructor. And sometimes that's not what everyone's looking for. So exactly the same with a book. If you pick it up and you think, something, I don't connect with this author or this genre, try something else. But don't let it ever put you off of reading, and don't let it ever put you off of trying something else and trying something different, because there will definitely be something out there that you really enjoy, even if it's a specific genre, or even if it's a specific, like I said before, author. Sometimes I know someone who actually, they pick up an author, if they really like them, they'll find that one author, all of their books, and go through all of their books. Whereas I'll go through different genres because I'm a mood reader. But I know someone who literally, they'll go through all of that author, and then once they finish that author, they'll then go on to another author and go through them, and they do it by author. Yeah.
Yeah. So like you said, just different for everybody, finding your own personal, unique kind of way of moving through reading, building a habit, maybe, sticking to a goal. I think it's important because it gives you that um, point of destination at some point, just so you can feel like you can do it. But also, like you said, don't be hard on yourself when life gets in the way.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things to really consider at the beginning of your journey, or even if you are on your journey now, is to kind of imagine yourself as the reader that you want to be. Like, if you think of somebody who reads, who inspires you at the moment, like what do they how do they spend their time during the day? Like what is the persona that you want to adapt into? So like we said, if you currently don't have the time to read, how can you make the time? So replacing one habit with another. So instead of watching TV, you can read more books. Um, but envisioning yourself now into that reality of that reader uh, really takes some time to think about what that feels like. Like, how do you feel being that person who reads books? What kind of books? Like, what brings you joy? And what is your why, essentially? Because your why will be your driving factor whenever you feel discouraged, whenever you feel lazy, whatever reasons come up. If you want to stick to your goal and you want to make this a habit, you can always come back to your why, and in that way motivate yourself again, discipline yourself to continue along this journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that something you feel has helped you kind of stick to reading more?
It has, because I made a conscious effort to be like, I don't want to be on my phone. Like, I specifically have my phone go into night mode at a specific time of the day, not in of the evening, and I actually have a limit on how much time I can spend on certain apps. So if I've spent too long, it will shut itself down. Obviously I can cancel that, but you know, that's not the point. So I actually have like I've only got an hour time limit on things like social media. Um, so, and then of course it goes into night mode, and I'm like, right, that means I need to get off. It's my cutoff point. And then that's where I'm like, right, I'm going to read. And something, you know, and I know I've said this to you before, I have a book everywhere I go. Whether it's I'm taking my digital device, or I'm taking a physical book, or I've got the digital device on my mobile. So if I've not taken those two things, I can still sit there and read. And if, you know, or even I've got an audio book, you know, that I'm just ready to listen to. And it's something you said about bringing you joy, like find that thing that brings you joy. And I find myself to be quite a productive person, um, personally. That's just who I am. That I always want to do something that I'm like, that's productive. And it gives me a type of rush from beginning to end. So to start something, to end something. And I genuinely just really enjoy that. I really enjoy that feeling. And I'm always, I mean, this is terrible. I'm always looking at how much percentage I've got left on my digital book, or I'll see how many pages I've got, and I'll, you know, on a physical book, and I'll be like, right, I'm going to read 50 pages today. And then I'll like put the bookmark to the 50-page mark, and then I'll read it and be like, oh, how many pages have I got left to the 50 pages? Because then you set yourself shorter and smaller goals, you know? Or if you put yourself down and be like, you know something, I'm going to read for 10 minutes. And that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to do anything else, but I'm going to give myself 10 minutes to just stop and to read. And to be honest with you, like you'll probably fly through those 10 minutes. The next time you look at the time, it will be like 30 minutes. Something else that I used to do, so when we said about, you know, when do you want to read and when do you want to, you know, and your why. So things like your commute. So that's one way to read. Like if you don't enjoy your commute, but you enjoy reading, so find what brings you joy. Take your book and just read your book. Something that I used to do was when I first got into like exercising after my youngest, my stamina was really bad. You know, it's, you know, 6 weeks after having a baby, and you know, you still feel like you were hit by a bus. You know? So but what I do is I would go on my treadmill, and I would walk, and I would read a book while on my treadmill, because at least I was moving. At least I'd started something. And to be honest with you, I'd look at the time and I'd be like, oh my God, it's been 30 minutes. Because the thing that brought me joy was reading. It wasn't being on the treadmill. It wasn't having to move my body, because, you know, being sitting still was actually making me worse after having a baby, even though my body hurt. I just was like, you know, you've been given the green light to physically move your body. You know, we're your yoga instructors, but your body just doesn't want to move how it used to move, and it still wants to recover. So you do something gentle. Well, that's walking. I couldn't go outside because, you know, the kids are sleeping. That was the best time for me to find time for myself, which is definitely something that I find reading is for me. It's definitely time for myself. So what I used to do was I used to walk on the treadmill. You know, I was lucky you know, my other half actually got me a treadmill because I missed running so badly. So he got me a treadmill, and I'd walk on my treadmill, and I would read a book whilst on my treadmill. And it gave me joy to read a book. And before I knew it, I'd done 30 minutes of walking. So now I do run regularly. But what I do is to cover, I can't look at the digital screen, because I'm just like, I'm always that person to want to be like, where am I? How far have I got? So what I do is I have my book on top of the screen, so to cover that out. But I've always got a book with me, or wherever I do, whatever I go. And like you said, your why. For me, it genuinely, it brings me joy. It's something I've created into my me time, which I highly recommend. So time for yourself, and to create that time for yourself. And yeah, so that's, and for me, two of those things, you know, reading and exercising. And that's what I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of make it a part of yourself.
Yeah.
Like you attach it to your everyday kind of activities almost, because for somebody who, when you told me actually, because you shared this with me that, oh, sometimes I do stretching like in a yoga position or something, I'll just sit down and read. Because reading 2 or 3 pages is more than not reading any at all. And
Yeah.
the more you do it, the more you do it. So when I started incorporating more of that, like, when I'm waiting for the kettle to boil or something like small, I'm picking up the book and that's becoming part of my routine and part of my awareness. And I'm drawn to it more and more. And that way, when I'm looking for a good book, I might hear it somewhere, or my friend might send me one through the post, which Nina actually, she surprised me and just, you know, she sent me this really, really lovely book, which brightened me up in at a time that I needed, and it inspired me again to read. And you just don't know how the signs and what you want will come to you. But when you open yourself, you focus yourself on what you feel aligned to, then you're more likely to receive it. And yeah, definitely your why. It's so important because sometimes we may think we want something, but if that doesn't align to our values, then it's not for us. We're not going to feel satisfied, even if we read 100 books in a year.
Yeah.
If we don't choose the right books, if actually holding a physical book is not um, our thing,
Yeah.
if maybe audiobooks are a thing, then if we make that small change, then that would, transform everything. So definitely experimenting, I think, and not being afraid to to
Yeah.
try something new, to ask for advice, and yeah. I think we can talk about books for another couple of hours, but we'll start to wrap this up. Before we go, I just wanted to ask you, Nina, where can people find you? You mentioned yoga, you mentioned writing, books. Tell us a bit more about how people can connect to you.
So the best way to connect to me is actually so my I do have a Bookstagram account where I regularly post book reviews, and I'm on book tours, and I actually put out small pieces of my writing on there. So not my main book, just little small like narrative pieces. And so that is on my Instagram account, and that is NL Craig Writes. So yeah, Craig, Craig. So NL Craig Writes. And then I do have a yoga account. I don't use it as much. I don't post as much on there. So I do. I am, if someone contacts me on there, then I am contactable. But I don't post on there as much. I am still teaching. But I'm not advertising as much. So I'm just doing small classes and private classes at the moment. But that account is Nina Lin Yoga. So Lin spelled Lin, so spelled a different way, but Nina Lin Yoga. So on my Instagram for my yoga account. So I hope that is one way. Yeah, if anyone
Yeah.
wants to connect, you're welcome to. So yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll link everything in the description box below, so people can connect to you whichever way they choose.
Sure.
And yeah, we would, I'm sure Nina would too, just love to hear your feedback, your takeaways on this episode, and we would love to know what would be the first step of building your reading habit. If you felt inspired through this conversation, do share it to others you feel you could connect with through the um, reading practice and also book love. And yeah, and we'll see you again next time.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on here. Thank you.
Thank you.